Hey there. So I'm going to show you how to do my Neptune Knot stitch. This is a stitch video, so it's not a complete project. You'll only see how to do the stitch, but I will likely give, I will give you tips and things in case you don't want to wait for me to do a finished project and, tell you how to do things. Okay, so I'm using landscape yarn. And it's in the color Perfect Storm. There you go. Now you know what color a perfect storm is. Okay. Now, the other thing is I'm using a Cindy Wood loom, and it's a 9.75 inch diameter. It's got 44 pegs, and it's a 5/8 inch gauge. Okay, pretty sure that says 44. Yeah, 44. Okay. So you don't need to mark the loom at all for this stitch. It's 2 rows, but it's pretty easy to do without being marked, but you can mark it if you want, if you think that'll help. But I have to mark just about everything, so if I didn't have to mark it, I don't think you'll have to. And you can see what the stitch looks like. And the reason I called it Neptune Knot is these look like planets to me. And then right here, in between them all, it looks like a knot. I don't know if we can get that close enough for you to see, but in here these all look like they're knotted, so called it the Neptune Knot. And I'll show you how I'm doing it. I'll show you the edge that I'm doing on this, but this is, I may or may not use this in my finished project, but I am liking this. And it's hard, it's small, so it's hard to stretch it out to really see, but the ends look okay. Just got that kind of knotted look that the needle knitter edge that's knits and pearls looks like. And I am doing a purl on my purl row of this and a knit on my knit row. So this isn't one of my no purl stitches. This has pearls, but they're not horrible. There aren't that many of them. And even if you made a big project, you do them on the row, but it's only every second peg. So it's really not a lot of pearls, but it actually makes this stitch have the texture that it has. And it's hard to tell when it's this small, but it does have a lot of texture in the last swatch I did. Okay, so 2 rows. And how I cast on was I just did a crochet chain cast on. It's on my channel. If you need to find a cast on and you want to do this particular one, it's on my channel. And then after that, I just did a row of owl eye. So I basically was going right into the stitch after that because owl eye after the chain works well. So that's how I did it. Very easy. So now I'm going to do an owl eye row. So if I had just cast it on, here's where I'd be. I'd be doing the owl eye row. So on an owl eye row, I'm doing an owl eye knit stitch on all of it, right? So I go over here and I go over this one. And then I take the working yarn, always on peg 1, go over peg 2. That's the owl eye stitch. You're on peg 1, you go over peg 1 and 2, and knit it off. Peg 1, over peg 1 and 2, knit it off. On peg 1, go over peg 1 and 2, knit it off. Peg 1, over peg 1 and 2, and knit it off. And that's all there is to doing owl eye. If you want to see the stitch more, it's on my channel in all kinds of places, including a stitch video of just owl eyes. So easy to do. So I'm just owl eyeing all the way around. And you want to do it loosely, and the reason you want to do it loosely is when you're going to be doing some yarn overs, and if you're nice and loose, it's going to be really easy to do the yarn overs. But owl eye tends to be easy to do yarn overs anyway. I'm using a yarn that has 0 stretch to it, so chances are your yarn will have more stretch. Okay, so we'll go over the last peg, 2 pegs, and then we're ready for row 2. And that's all we do, row 1 and 2 over and over again. So for row 2, You can do your end pegs any way you want. I'm just going to show you the one that I'm doing here, so that you have one any way to start. And this is going to be a purl row, so I'm just going to purl this one. So you purl, I'm purling this, but for the pattern you need to purl peg 1. So I'm going to purl peg 1. Oh, and you do use even pegs. Even pegs is important because I'm going to purl peg 1 and I'm going to purl the second last peg as well. Okay, now once you've purled it, you're going to be doing yarn overs. And so what I like to do is do all the yarn overs, but you don't have to do that. You can knit as you go along, but I'm going to yarn over. So on peg 2 I yarn over onto peg 3. Next peg I take it and I yarn over. Next peg I take it and I yarn it over. Put it on the peg beside it. So that's all I do, is move them all over, and then this peg will be purled, so it just sits there. Now what I'm going to do is purl the 2 yarns together. So you're going to yarn over this one and you're just going to purl these 2 pegs. Yarn over, purl these 2 pegs. Yarn over, purl these 2 pegs. Yarn over, purl these 2 pegs. And then you're going to purl this last peg. And then you're going to do, as I said, you can do your end stitch any way you want, but because I'm purling, I'm going to purl the end peg as well. I'm purling the 2 pegs on the end every time I go. And when I go back, I'll be knitting the 2 pegs on the end. So that'll just give me an end that I thought would go with this, because the pattern is very close to the edge, so I didn't want to do an ally edge because it's too thick. I just wanted a thin edge so you wouldn't have a big bunchy edge here. But you could also slip your edge. There's probably enough purls to keep you from curling in here. But anyway, now we go back and we do the owl eye stitch. I also have a cast off on my channel that will match the bind on. So if you don't want to wait for my project videos, you can go ahead. I'm giving you enough information that you should be able to go ahead. Oops, yarn is splitting. So I'm just doing owl eye. And I'll do that second row with you one more time. This is the first row repeated. It's our row 3 of the video, but we just do the row 1 and the row 2 over and over. I really like this stitch. It's really pretty. There. And then to come back, I'm just going to purl the first stitch, but like I said, you can do any edge you want, and purl the second stitch. So basically I have a garter type edge going on over 2 pegs, and that will keep it from doing any curling, but I don't think it would have needed much, and also give me a thinner kind of edge because I thought that would go better with this pattern. And then we're going to do our yarn overs. Now if you wanted to mark them, you might want to mark. So we're starting on peg 3 to move it over. You might want to mark all your peg 3, all those pegs or those pegs, but it's pretty easy. That's why I didn't have to mark it for myself. I'm just doing the 2 purls, and then I'm going to yarn over like that every, so it's always the same pegs you're yarning over. And then that the second last peg will be purled. Now sometimes this is something that could happen, so I'm going to tell you about it. Sometimes you're purling, and if you have pegs that aren't Cindy Woods and are pegs that don't have much of a top, when you're doing this, this peg could slip over on you. So it could slip right over there when you're doing your purl. So you've done your purl and you're like, what's happened to that? If that should happen, you just go down, pull it down, and see the yarn here right at the top? you just put that right back on. This is a loose stitch, and I'm actually, because I'm using a number 4 yarn on a wide gauge, I'm getting a lacy effect. But should you use a bulky yarn, it's going to come together and give you this kind of a stitch. So it looks really pretty bulky too. I have a swatch of that, but I just couldn't seem to find where I put them, and I have so many swatches. I'm going to actually go through them and organize them a bit better, and so that I at least have swatches, more swatches to show you for the video. But there will certainly be projects coming in this, and as I said, it looks really nice, bulky, and gives a really beautiful texture. That's a pretty easy stitch to do. Okay, so yarn over, purl 2 together. And because you're doing 2 rows, you always know by which direction you're going, what stitch you're working. So that makes it easy. Now, I guess you're going to ask, does this work in the round? And it does work in the round. No problem. It's going to look slightly different because your stitches are both going the same way. And owl eye looks different. Anyway, whether it's in the round or flat. But it will look fine. It gives you a nice stitch too, and eventually we'll have a project with it in the round as well. I don't know when. I have a lot of things on my plate for work to do with loom knitting, so I can't promise any dates for anything. But I didn't want you to wait for any of these stitches that you've seen me post. So I'm going to put out my stitch videos, and then if I don't come up with work right away, you'll have the stitch video, and I will give you tips on how to use the stitches so you can go ahead and do something. But there you go. This is what it looks like, and it's a really pretty stitch. And if I kind of stick it together like it would look bulky, it's still a really pretty stitch, nice and bulky, so you can use your thick chunky yarn if you want, or you can have a more lacy look. And then your other side looks really nice too. It's a different stitch, but it's pretty nice. You could use this as your front side if you want. And either way, it would be reversible. You could use either side. It looks pretty nice. And also in a hat, you can make your hat reversible. Both your sides will look slightly different because where we purled, of course, you got knit on this other side. Still got a real lot of texture. The camera's not really picking up the texture very good, but it's a very textured stitch. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that stitch, and until next time, we'll see you.